it's Mediums in Action with me, Martin Litwilson, and my good friend and expert medium, Ian Doherty.
Good evening or good morning, whatever you are, and it's nice to be here chatting to you again, Martin, and looking forward to the podcast.
Yeah, same here. It's a lovely summer's day, and we're full of ideas, and we're buzzing to get talking about the subject ahead. So the subject we are talking about today is psychic and the medium. Now, can you be just a psychic? Can you just be a medium? Or are you instantly a psychic medium because you hear these terms being bandied around? I'm a spiritualist medium. I'm a international medium. I'm a clairvoyant medium. So is everybody a psychic medium, or are we definitely split? So, I mean, my sort of point of view is that if you're a medium, you're definitely a psychic as well. Would you agree with that, Ian?
Oh, yeah. Psychic ability is what necessarily comes first. You know, it's the sensitivities. People say, you know, I just knew what was going to happen. I knew who was on the phone. I had a prophetic dream. You know, all of that type of thing, which is very much psychic because people can, you know, when they say, I'm a empath, and they feel an illness off people, or they feel when a person's moody or down, then that is psychic. Where people tend to get a little bit sort of the misnomers with it is that it's the terminology, which is what the podcasts are for, really, to try and take away all the gumph with it all. If you tune into a person, we use that word tuning as a phrase, and let's say you are picking up on a person, they've got a bad mood, whether you're picking up any sort of ailments with him, it's called a psychic ability. Yet if you're doing the same with a spirit person who people cannot necessarily see, then it's termed as clairsentience because it's from a distance, but in essence it's the same thing. Most mediumship, when people start, they have a strong clairsentience. So basically, it's taking that psychic ability to that next level. And when I say next level, I am not saying that mediums are better than psychics. I have several friends who, in a psychic ability, they would knock your socks off. Absolutely amazing. The medium is very much listening to what the spirit side of life is saying, you know, their guide or guides, and they're talking to people on behalf of their loved ones who have passed away. Whereas psychic ability, you know, it's doing the divination. We talked about it on our last podcast, doing the tarot, whatever, you know, the pendulum, all of that type of thing, whereby the information is derived either from the psychic's own feelings, as in, this means this, when that happens, it means so and so. What the difference, if you could call it a difference, is that loosely psychics are termed not to be fully aware of the spirit side of life as mediums are. That really is the only difference. In essence, in becoming a medium, you have to have a very strong underpinned psychic ability.
And that's the end of the podcast. Hope you enjoyed that, everybody.
Sorry, Martin. Yeah.
No. There's some very, very valid points in there, Ian. Really good points. And one thing I totally agree with you and share with you is that often psychic ability is the gateway into mediumship. Some people have these experiences, as you said, you know, the telephone's going to ring at any moment, or you know, you have this inclination that something's going to happen. And is that psychic ability or is that prediction? And what's the difference between both of those? So that's the discussion as well to have.
Yeah.
But I do honestly believe that most people do and can move on. Myself and Ian, we both have a belief that everyone can be a medium and that all of us have got it inside of us. Now, a lot of the psychic friends that I know are probably like yours, Ian, that they are very, very strong on the psychic side. So they're probably not as forthcoming towards mediumship than they should be. And they could probably be very good mediums. But
yeah,
I suppose it's a bit like an oil painter and a pastel painter. If you're very good at pastels but no good at oils, you stick with your pastels, don't you?
Yeah. I think that's a very, very good, very, very good point. People tend to or will stay in their strong suit. Mine is visual. I am very visual. I will see a person's loved one who's passed away. I'll see them walking into the room, and certainly on the paranormal events I've been on, it's seeing in such clarity. In the garb that they would have worn in whatever time period they were actually from. So that was my strength, but my psychic ability sort of it was always there. And I do feel people, particularly younger, people growing up, childhood, maybe around 9 or 10 or earlier with some people, it tends to go over where there's a lot of sensitivities. You're starting to span out into the world, you're pushing boundaries, and you just feel a hell of a lot more. That with myself, without going into a sob story, bullied throughout school. I had a really bad wicked stutter, and I was picked on, so I was a little bit sort of introverted as a child, but that helped enhance my psychic ability, my sense of sensitivities. And I was seeing people, I was feeling people, the energies, and most of it at a time was more of a ghost energy. So, and I do feel that this is where again people can branch over or push out, should I say, from psychic ability in relatively comfort in order to go into the mediumship. Working with a ghost energy is purely psychic, because you have to work on feelings. You are not getting told my name is, because basically it's an energy signature. So you have to pull the energy. This person feels like this, their personality, whatever. So
you make a really good point there, because how I've always seen psychic ability and mediumship, and obviously there's the explanations that we've all been taught or what we expect, but I think when I look at psychic ability, what I seem to see with psychic ability as an observer, as a researcher, is psychic ability seems to be where you interact with the present consciousness. And what I mean by that is the consciousness that is here and now. And I don't want to say living, because as you say, ghost is there, but ghost is a very fixed, it's a very earthly, shall we say, a grounded energy. So psychic seems to be connected to, let's say, a localized energy, and that includes whether people are picking up from other people psychically, or whether they're picking up on ghost energy. It's a very localized energy that they're sensing. So it's a close interaction. Mediumship, on the other hand, is different in that you're not picking up on the localized. What you are actually doing is communicating with spirit. And this is where basically you're connected to the internet. So rather than talking to somebody in the room, when you're a medium, you're connected to the internet, and you're talking to somebody in Spain or wherever.
Yeah, definitely.
So to me, I think this is what's never really been discussed, is why is psychic different to mediumship? And I think it's because it's almost like a localized consciousness versus a global consciousness.
Yeah.
I think it's different, possibly different vibrations, or possibly different wavelengths, or whatever. There is this difference, and it must be how our brain is wired, or how we are in that particular status at the time. So, like when we meditate, we can get deeper, and we can pull through a lot of strong mediumship messages, communicate with spirit. But also as well is when you look at people who do remote viewing, they had similar exercises in that they would perform a meditation and again slow down their brainwave to enhance the connection, so that they could actually travel these distances in their mind and view these things. So I think there is this difference, and the best way I can explain it is that you're localized. That if you're reading somebody's mind, the only grey area for me is where it borders on prediction, and then you've got to start saying, okay, so what is predicting? If you know what the Zener cards, I know you do, Ian, but if people out there don't know what the Zener cards are, they're the ones where you've got star, you've got wavy lines, you've got square, circle. There's 6 in total. You normally put them face down, you shuffle them, put them face down, and you ask somebody else to predict which card is you hold up. Usually you hold up the card, and one person is staring at that card, trying to send the message to the other person, and psychically they say it's this. So obviously you've got a 1 in 6 chance. Now my wife's a very, very good psychic. She's very good at that. She gets 80%, if not more. She's very, very accurate. So we decided to do a test. So I removed me projecting the image, and what I did is I selected a card, didn't look at it, didn't touch it either. So we can't say that my energy of my body connected with the card, and then she predicted what that card was, and she was right. It never went down. Her accuracy.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what's that then? Because it must be some form of prediction, because she's telling me what's going to happen in 30 seconds and minutes time when I turn that card over.
Yeah.
But yet my energy is not really connected to that card, or we've done it in a particular way. So it has to be some form of prediction.
Well, yeah. At first I thought, is it the, what do you call it, emotional, the love link between the two of you that sort of conveys what that message is? Like I say, maybe not your body, but perhaps your mind comes over. She goes, oh yeah, that I recognise that automatically as being his reaction when it's a wavy line or when it's a triangle. Yeah. When you're looking at a prediction, then I do feel it's very, very, very much coming over as the fabric of time. My guide William always said to me, the laws of this universe, of our world, E equals M. MC squared and all of that. It's very much a case of it doesn't correlate within spirit world. It doesn't have, because the fabric's different, so there are different laws. So maybe that is one sort of thing of coming in, and we are guilty. I do feel everybody is. We looking at my PC screen. I've got a clock in the bottom right hand corner. I've got a watch on. There's a clock on the wall. If there's a radio, there's always telling the time. They're watching the telly or the news channel, whatever, there's always the time, the radio. So we are fractured into 1440 seconds of minutes, 1440 minutes. I don't know how many seconds it is. We are governed by all of that, and we narrow our own perception to be either going forward on a in a linear way, like a train on the track. We go forward and think about next week. We go backwards and remember the previous week. Whereas Spirit always say that time, whatever, it's in a 360 degree everywhere, so we can take a side step, say go northeast, or we can go directly east or southeast in a direction and pick up what is happening in a fraction of a minute, because time is going so damn quick that we can sort of think, oh yes, I am seeing this, and it's almost a case of seeing the future marginally in a fraction of a second, or what seems to us as being 10 or 15 seconds, a minute, when in essence it's gone, because time, I do believe, will probably travel faster than light, so it's here. And I think we pigeonhole it rather than what it is.
Yeah, I think also as well is we don't have a fundamental understanding of how time and space-time works. Space-time is very different to what we see or believe, and we look. I mean, I'm looking at this as a broad scope here, but if you look at quantum physics, and quantum physics believe that with every decision or every change, then that creates another universe or another timeline in which that person's running. So if I just suddenly switched off my laptop now and stopped recording, that might be happening in another universe, and those consequences are happening over there. They're not happening here because I'm continuing talking. So multiple time universes are happening at that same time. The interesting thing is, what I've always found almost as an explanation is you look at some of the very ancient religions and philosophies, and it suggests that consciousness is spread through the universe. It's aware. We are the universe reflecting on itself, in that we are living the universe and reflecting back on ourselves. And it kind of explains the spirit world in a way, in that when we pass away, we go back to the consciousness,
Yes.
So, but the interesting thing is, what we do know about the universe, the majority of the universe's life, which is God knows how many trillion years. But there's an amazing fact that for 99.9999999% of its life, the universe will be in absolute darkness.
Yeah.
This light now, the stars and everything like that, this is only right at the beginning. The universe's time is going to expand, almost for us infinitely, but obviously it does have an end. But the interesting thing is when you look at this, is space and time does break down. Time does break down. And there will be a time in the universe when time doesn't exist, because the whole machination of the whole thing just breaks down. So, again, as you say, we've pigeonholed ourselves to believe that time exists. And therefore, when we're saying how is prediction working, it comes back down to kind of the quantum theory, where there are multiple decisions. If we say there's 6 cards, so my wife made 6 individual decisions. 5 of those were wrong, 1 of those was right.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm landing 80% of the times in the right. So somehow she's able to kind of leapfrog that, and we're getting the right answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that kind of explains psychic abilities, is that we are able to connect locally. We're able to pull through a lot of information, and I'd certainly say as well, I mean, we've said that some psychics aren't mediums, but some mediums aren't very good psychics.
There's some people, mediums, who've gone seemingly into it straight away, and they seem, I do feel these are the people who deal in facts and remember number plates and all that type of thing, but not necessarily wanting to put over this person loves you. So I feel they have more of a clairaudience, hearing, rather than it is feeling. Maybe they distance themselves on a feelings level, the sort of empathy, and bring through bang bang bang, which is fine, but you're not getting the whole picture. You know what I mean? So I just get the sense here it's the psychic ability that gives you that link into spirit on a much deeper level. I've been moved to tears many a time, and it's because of the the feeling of that love is just pouring through, where I do feel people who go straight to the mediumship, which is their choice, sometimes I wouldn't necessarily say lack, you call it empathy, but don't push out in that area. They're comfortable with where they are.
So I think our conclusion is that, yes, you can be psychic and a medium, and you can be a medium and be psychic. But as we discuss in our course, that you may be a stronger clairvoyant and not stronger clairaudient. It's how you're, and let's talk about what shapes these factors as much as anything. It can be the factors that can make you more clairaudient, or it's how you are personality wise as much as anything.
It's how you've been brought up. Looking at how we respond to teaching, be it school, being it in the workplace, a good sort of put over is, you were stopped at the side of the road in your car when you were down. Or can you tell me how to get to so and so, please? Somebody might say, you go down the road 200 meters, there'll be a red sign, you're right, you turn right there, you go to traffic light, you turn right. And people who were clairaudient or have a stronger clairaudience will remember directions. They might even want to write it down. Hang on, I'll do this, and they can follow it better because they've been given do this. Some people will take it on board. Remember a red sign, turn right, traffic lights, a white pub, the Bull and Dog. Okay, and I turn left there, and it's on my right. So they'll be looking for these visual cues. And other people, though that sort of thing there really puts over to clairaudience and clairvoyance, but it's how we respond in that workplace. I think people who naturally want to help, a good team players and all of that, I do feel are going to be more empathetic, make a good psychic, and make a good medium.
Totally agree with you. And we did ask for a number of questions out there that we was doing a special podcast on psychic ability. Did we get any questions at all?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. We had there's one question particularly of interest here, and it crosses the both, I feel, but I sort of feel that you would be better suited with your knowledge in answering this. And the question is, where does astral travel and remote viewing fit in psychic ability wise?
I mean, that is interesting. Myself and Ian can't recommend Scott Rogo, his books enough.
Yeah, yeah,
Both the skeptical community and also the believer community find his books very, very approachable. But he does talk a lot about astral projection, premonition, psychic ability, mediumship. He delivers the facts to you, and then you make your own decisions, which I've always been a firm believer of.
Yeah, he does. He writes very well.
I mean, from my perspective, because obviously I've read things like The Psychic Warrior, the stories of Ingo Swann and Uri Geller. Now, it's my opinion that Uri Geller is an absolute fraud. Anybody who has any belief that Uri Geller is some sort of psychic or whatever should actually read James Randi's expose of it, because you read into it and you see that a lot of the experiments where they were doing remote viewing and him predicting that, let's say they had 6 canisters and in one of them there was water, and he would predict which one had water in it. They were all of the experiments were utterly not tight enough for science. So what they don't tell you in the reports of why Uri was so successful is that literally all his friends and family and his entourage was in the same room while the experiment was being set up. So it does give that opportunity that while he's trying to predict, he could be looking up, and if one of his family member winks over a particular canister, then the water's in there.
Yeah.
All of the experiments should have been prepared in a blank room with nobody in it apart from the one scientist, and then it should have been brought through. Instead, the experiments were set up in front of his family.
Yeah.
So his family knew exactly what was happening. I'm not suggesting that they passed it on, but I think the best thing to do is really just remove Uri Geller from the whole thing. But we can see the experiments of psychic viewing, remote viewing, and we look at things like David Morehouse and Ingo Swann. It's very much like what we've discussed, Ian. They had all these training experiences. They did things like Gansfield, which is various experiments to see if, not to check psychic ability, but to see how the brain reacts. Yeah. They did things like that. These people were selected because they had, or was believed to be, very good psychics. And Ingo Swann really stands out as being the real, kind of gem in there.
Yeah.
And he would be given just a set of coordinates. Then he would be expected to meditate. And sometimes these sessions would last between an hour to 8 hours.
Wow.
He would just be sat in the room meditating. I think this is where my explanation is for you, is that I think there is visualization comes into play then. It's where to imagine ourselves getting to a place we believe that we're astral traveling, and that somehow there is kind of a see-through space ghost sort of version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is us visualizing this, that we are kind of astral traveling, or we are remote viewing, and that there's a version of us there. One gentleman went to Venus, and I think 5 years before we actually knew what Venus was constructed of or what was underneath the clouds, the astral projected to Venus and was stood on the rocky planet and described what it was like. And he saw himself as kind of like a see-through ghost walking around. He said he was like astral traveling himself.
Yeah.
So I think this is some way of our mental visualization. We project this idea that we are traveling there, when actually we're kind of mentally traveling. There's nothing there. We're projecting ourselves to a particular area. It's my personal belief that if that area has been viewed by anybody who's living, then it's recorded in the consciousness.
Yes, definitely. It is a way of putting that over. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Now, obviously, that kind of throws out the Venus idea, because nobody's ever been on Venus, but he was there to project. So obviously, somehow he was able to do that. So that throws that in as it works. But I think certainly with Earth, I think it's far more, it's definitely some form of psychic connection, because all of the places that they ever went to have actually been viewed by human eyes and actually been recorded in the consciousness. So it's actually all of the visualization, all the bump, all the gumph and everything like that. It all comes down to connecting to the local consciousness, what we did before, and your brain is taken to those particular coordinates or name or something like that. Certainly in Russia, they went further. So people were given a name, and then they were able to predict where those people were. So they said, I don't know, Yuri Gagarin or whatever.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, I can see a room, I can see posters on the wall, I can see a television, and I can see a rug and that sort of thing. I can see that there's a yellow cup on the mug on the floor and that sort of thing. They were 70% right. So again, that suggests that not only can you connect just by coordinates, but you can also connect by people's names or thoughts. So again, I think that's psychic. My spirit guide's saying, don't forget, there could be some push for mediumship as well there. But anyway, so I definitely think that remote viewing and astral travel is a psychic phenomenon. I don't know what you think of astral travel and people coming out of their bodies and things.
I've read the Scott Rogo and that. I have an interest on it, but I've never tried to be doing it. To be perfectly honest, it's something that it doesn't have interest, but I just don't feel that I want to push into that area as yet. I do feel it is. I do feel it is very, very possible, though. Well, it's more than just possible. I do feel it does happen. Where you. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm not an expert on it at all, but I know two people who have had astral projections, and one of them was in the army, and in the 1960s, I didn't know this, and I checked it, and he was telling the truth. But in the 1960s, Stonehenge was actually protected at night, certainly around the summer solstice, by the army. Yeah. And he was up there one night. It was a lovely night, and basically they had a Land Rover flat roof. So he grabbed his sleeping bag and he thought, oh, I'll have a sleep on top of the Land Rover. And
I've done that myself.
Yeah, had a sleep on the Land Rover. It was a lovely summer's night. He fell asleep, and then suddenly he was aware of himself floating above the Land Rover, and he could see his friend having a cigarette walking away. And he floated for a while. He was above Stonehenge, and then suddenly he dropped and he shook himself out. He was awake. Interestingly, when he turned round, he could see his friends walking off, and he was smoking a cigarette. So now you could say, well, okay, while he was asleep, he heard the noise of a lighter being switched on. He thought his friend, he could sense that. I mean, this guy is. I knew him for 20 odd years. He's passed away now, but he was a salt of the earth. Didn't believe in anything like this at all, but he 100% said that's the only weird experience I ever had. I don't know how I could everything was so vivid. He said it wasn't like he'd never had vivid dreams before, but then he did. Yeah. And then the second example I know was a trainee psychologist, a lovely guy. Again, started being interested in unusual phenomena because one day he slept on the top bunk and there was plenty of space. He drifted off to sleep. And he woke up and he said he could feel his nose touching the ceiling, the roof. So he opened his eyes. He kind of panicked and he pushed against the ceiling and realized he was floating. And he wasn't. He turned behind and his body was there. And then suddenly he fell and he woke up again. So, but in both cases, they were out of the body. They saw their own bodies. Yeah. Was it lucid dreaming? Most of them woke up after being asleep for a long time, so I kind of think that rules that out. But to me, I don't know. I don't know if it's, again, some sort of form of psychic projection that we think we are floating when actually it's our psychic consciousness that is kind of exploring, going beyond the auric field, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's the out of body experience, isn't it? Again, Rogo talks about it a lot. Where people on the operating theatre, they sort of come around and they tell the doctors what they were talking about, whether it was a joke or whether they talk about the operation, what equipment they used. Even people sat, family members in the corridor, worrying, are they going to make it? Having news about them, bringing back and saying, yes, this is what's happened. There's even cases now where doctors, whatever, or scientists are leaving notes on top of wardrobes. So if they do come out, they can say, "Oh, I saw your note up there saying boo." So it's that type of thing. You know what I mean?
I think it was Scott Rogo and some of his team or a team that he worked with that actually started placing different objects like balls or toy cars, kind of really unusual things you wouldn't find in a hospital on top of cabinets.
Yeah.
And I think several times people who, let's say, went into cardiac arrest, or and during that time they had an out of body experience, and actually was able to say, oh, on top of that cupboard there's a so and so for some reason. It was like, So, I mean, it's interesting. Again, it feels to me like it's like a psychic project. It's like a projection of your consciousness, and how we try to cope with it is that our brain tries to give it an earthly experience. So it tries to imagine that it is your whole body that's coming out of your, like a ghost version comes out of ourselves. And I think it's the way of how our brain copes with it, is that it creates these constructs. And it's like what I was saying earlier, that I think mediumship is your modem connecting to the internet, in that where the modem, we connect to the spirit world or the consciousness, however you see it, so that when we do see a spirit and in front of us, that projection has actually been downloaded, and it's how our brain interprets that download, and then it creates the holographic projection for us. So so that's why I think psychic ability is very different. Is mediumship is the downloader, and psychic is us watching television.
It's just been put into my mind now, about deathbed visions, when, let's say, mum is in the kitchen, and then, the little girl comes up and says, how come I've just seen Uncle Frank is in his military uniform? And you're thinking, Uncle Frank's, over in whatever, and then you get a phone call, or or a telegram, whatever, to say that the person's passed, but you're thinking, but they were here and one of my children's seen them, so is that a form of astral travel?
I wonder again if that is, and I'm not trying to make it fit any theories, but any ideas, but I mean, going back many years, there's been this appearance of somebody just before they die, and there's a famous story in York about it, about brother and sister, that the brother appeared to the sister, and he said three words, which they both believed in it. If either one of us dies, we've got to project to the other person and say these three words, and we know that the other person's dead. And the brother turned up and said these words. But again, it makes me wonder if it's some form of astral projection before we die. The feelings are picked up psychically by the other person.
Yeah.
And that's why they physically see that person.
Yes.
Because I think most of the cases are that, apart from the York one, I don't know of anywhere there's been multiple witnesses seeing one particular person.
No, that's it. I've not heard of it.
Because when Kitchener died, when Lord Kitchener died, I think his boat was sank. He appeared to his wife. His wife saw him, and she knew straight away he was dead. But there was three other people in the room, and they didn't see him.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a psychic reach out, and you are then shown that particular person. So it's like a telephone with a TV on it. Skyping where you see somebody in it. It's like the message is projected to you, and you construct that it's a human stood in front of you. Do you know? Maybe it's something like that. I don't know.
When you were talking there, William, when I was listening to you, William said basically very much along the lines of what you've had. He said, it's a link to the physical mind, and then the mind creates that image in an objective way. Now, people who were reading the course or doing the course, that's the mediumship course we have on Udemy. Then you are basically, what happens is an objective clairvoyance is when there's communication come into the mind spirit wise, and your brain thinks, oh yeah, okay, I've got that, and it projects an image much like a hologram, and we can see it as if we're looking with our physical eyes, but nobody else can, so it's almost a dialing that brain, and that brain creates that image, as if, like I say, on Star Wars, with Princess Leia. Interesting that we you were thinking that, and then William was saying this is how it works, so it's good. I like that.
Well, I think that this is why we work well. We both taken two very different paths to get to the same spot. We both have a lot of experience and knowledge. And yes, I am blowing our trumpet here, but we do read. We do. We're not just static in our beliefs. And maybe if two or three scientific papers came out, or experiments, or anybody out there needs to check out the work of Dean Radin, is you can see that, science is getting involved in this. And I know for a fact that myself and Ian, that if we saw something and it gave an alternative explanation, and it kind of tied in with what we said, we'd be looking to change our views and looking how that
definitely
works. And
yeah,
we're not fixed. And again, it's one of those things that we think we know some of the answers, and certainly when it comes to things like psychic ability or time or time and space works, you have to keep an open mind. And I certainly feel, we've not even we've not even explored consciousness yet. I think it's far, far more multi-leveled, different than we ever think. And I think
definitely
it's going to take a million years to get through all that. But I think when people look back at this time and certainly about psychics, I think people will look and certainly at the moment, science frowns upon psychic ability or mediumship, but I believe that in the future people will see that there was something involved in mediumship and psychic ability. I remember it must have been about 10 years ago on BBC Two, the scientists were saying it's only a matter of time before we realize that there is a global consciousness, that we are all connected in this conscious. I mean, that's 10 years ago. I mean, we must be very close. Yeah. How is that going to change how we interpret psychic ability, how we interpret mediumship, how we interpret what we call energy, and how is that going to explore forward? So anybody who does kind of think, well, there's no such thing as psychic ability, there's no such thing as this, that, and the other, I think you really need to keep your options open, because I think, we've both talked about this privately, in that science is moving so quickly into this field and proving a lot of our theories right. It's only a matter of time before there's some real big groundbreaking ideas. Yeah, and
I really look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only thing I don't look forward to is probably the technology, because we'll probably start communicating psychically or something.
No, but you know what? Honestly, there's a couple of things there. William just sort of gave me a gentle nudge, saying that Spirit for a long time have been saying that science will be the saviour of spiritualism, and therefore, spirit. But it comes over into a situation whereby we can pick up a digital device, maybe a phone, and speak to our loved ones in spirit. Oh, hello, how are you today? I've had this, I've been thinking about you, and that's there. Whether we're cyborg and we have these sort of mechanical digital implants, we can see it now with vision and hearing. It's helping the brain to remap signals that are put over in a similar way to what they would be anyway, i.e. electrical. So I do feel something like that could happen, or something. I was trying not to laugh out loud, but it was put over as the kiddies TV program, the Tomorrow People, when they held to the belt and they went, then maybe we can be sat here thinking, I wonder how so and so is, and then pop up in that person's mind, very much as we've linked in with the astral, and and they are seeing us as we're talking to them. It's like they're watching the TV screen, and hello, yeah, all right, how are you? But you get the feelings, emotions, you get the tangibility if it was real. So maybe that's in scope,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they're saying at the moment that there is somebody in this world who's been born, and they honestly believe that person will live to 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
And the reason is be it through technical advances. People are talking about how we could possibly record consciousness in some backup storage now. We've now got. I mean, we can all laugh at this and say, "Oh yeah, we couldn't ever keep consciousness on a USB stick or anything like that." But you imagine it was only 10 years ago that the biggest USB stick that you could get was probably 500 meg, if that.
Yeah.
I mean, you now get a terabit. You now get we are. I was reading the other day about how memory for computers has literally doubled every 3 years. Every 3 years, I think it is.
Easily. Well,
so we're there where we could actually, and personally, I don't fancy staying in a computer monitor for eternity. No. But I don't know. It's really interesting where it's going. It's quite scary as well. But
Yeah.
I think all the way through this, what we've got to also say is spirit is also here as well. So, there's reasoning why things are happening. There are going to be big changes happening over this next 10 years, not just through climate change, but also through other developments.
Yeah.
And, spirit's here for everybody.
I do feel we are within this this 21st century. I do feel we're going to colonize Mars, colonize the moon, reaching out there. I do feel it's going to happen. Certainly not in my lifetime, but when the senses. But you never know. I could go back and be a captain on Space 1999. But I firmly believe we are going to search out into the universe.
Yeah, totally agree. Right, let's call this at the end. I hope everybody's enjoyed this. We're branching out more to talk about psychic ability, mainly driven by you, that you want our sorts of feedback and feelings about psychic ability. If you've got any questions or anything like that, please let us know, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.
Yep. Thank you, Martin, and thank you to everybody who listens and supports the podcast. It really is nice, and it's just good having nice chats about this, Martin.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again, Ian, and thank you everybody for listening. Please leave us a review, and thank you for all the people who have left us reviews. That's been really nice of you to do that. Thank you very much. And so this has been Mediums in Action with me, Martin Litt-Wilson, and Ian Doherty.
Bye-bye.